The ribbon slipped between his fingers like it knew what was coming. Velvet black, tied in a neat bow. He tugged it open with one hand while holding the microphone in the other, still grinning from the applause that had barely finished echoing off the crystal chandeliers. The bag opened. He reached in, and when his hand came out holding the plaque, I watched the color drain from his face. It was like watching someone fall without moving. The muscles in his jaw didn't twitch, his shoulders didn't drop, but his eyes gave it all away. They flicked left toward the woman in the navy sequined dress, then right toward the stage lights, the guests, the string quartet still softly playing. Then they landed on me. My name is Valerie. I'm 56 years old, and this is how I turned a retirement gala into a courtroom. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The ballroom at the Claremont Hotel in Charlotte wasn't built for subtlety. It was built to show off. Gold filigree trimming the ceiling, champagne fountains, waiters in crisp white jackets moving like shadows through clusters of executives and spouses. The kind of room where people wear secrets like cologne and leave betrayal folded neatly in their coat pockets at the check-in desk. Tonight, it was my husband's farewell. 37 years in logistics and warehousing. Vice President of Operations. The man they said never missed a deadline, never lost a contract, never left a single penny off a ledger. But he left something behind. Her. She'd been circling him all evening. I noticed the way her hand hovered behind his back without touching. The way she laughed a beat too late at jokes no one else found funny. The way her dress caught the flashbulbs like she was the event. I'd seen it before, not just in women like her, but in her. Julia, his secretary. She used to smile at me like I was company property, like my presence in the room was a budget line item she could argue against, and she always wore navy. I don't know why I noticed that. Maybe because I used to love navy. Now I couldn't wear it without feeling like I was auditioning to be ignored. When she stepped onto that stage and pressed the gift bag into his hand, it wasn't part of the schedule. I should know. I'd helped write the schedule. But no one stopped her. Not the MC, not the company president, not the caterer cueing the slideshow. Because when a secretary in sequins walks like she's earned the right to interrupt, they all assume she has. He took the bag like it was an afterthought, smiling, nodding, probably expecting cufflinks or a retirement pen. Instead, he pulled out a black granite plaque. Small, heavy, laser engraved in silver cursive, and I watched the lines around his mouth tighten like they were trying to hold something back. A name? A date? No, just one phrase. Suite 814. Our secret. I don't know if anyone else saw it. Not yet, but he did, and she did, and I had. I stood near the edge of the dance floor, fingertips resting on the stem of a half-empty flute. My dress was wine-colored satin. He hadn't complimented it, not once. He looked at me for just a second too long, like he didn't know whether I knew. But of course I knew, not just because of what was on the plaque, because I'd ordered it 3 weeks earlier, using her company card, with a recorded call where she'd said the engraving out loud, thinking she was confirming a corporate award for a regional partner. I'd intercepted the email confirmation before she could delete it, printed the receipt, tucked it into the folder I'd labeled, "After the toast." I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. Just the kind you give a stranger who drops their drink and pretends it didn't happen. He tucked the plaque back into the bag like it might vanish if he didn't look at it. The string quartet slowed. Guests began to clap again, unsure of what they were clapping for. Maybe for his long service, maybe for the awkward silence that no one wanted to claim. I stepped forward, lifted my glass, tapped it once with a fork. The room shifted. Half a dozen heads turned. His eyes widened like he'd forgotten I existed. Me, a toast to legacy. My voice didn't shake, not even once. I practiced this in my head every night for the last 12. Me, to 37 years of contracts and warehouses and late-night strategy sessions. Laughter scattered, too brittle. Me, to partnerships not just professional but personal. I saw Julia's hand twitch near her clutch, like she wanted to run but hadn't rehearsed an excuse. Me, to loyalty and truth and the things that can't be hidden behind office walls, hotel suite doors, or velvet ribbons. I let the silence wrap around that sentence like gift paper. Then I nodded toward the AV booth, and the screen flickered to life. The email lit up the ballroom wall. The engraved order confirmation. Her name, her company card, her voice clip faint but clear. Julia. Yes, the engraving is Suite 814, our secret. Just like we said. Thanks. A beat. Then another. Then the room exhaled. The company president stepped forward. Someone whispered something near the back. The string quartet stopped playing. And my husband? He didn't say a word. He just stood there, gift bag in one hand, career in the other. And I finished my champagne. The bubbles hissed faintly against the rim as if applauding with me. The sweetness turned bitter halfway down. I could feel the eyes, dozens of them, sliding over my shoulders, trying to piece together what they'd just seen. The whispers started small, like ripples at the edge of a pond, then wider. She used the company card? Suite 814. That's the Claremont, right? Oh my God, I didn't stay to listen to the rest. I didn't need to. I'd already memorized every possible reaction in my head. The shock, the pity, the disgust, the faux concern. I'd prepared for this like a presentation, because that's what it was. Evidence, witnesses, and one perfect demonstration. When I glanced toward Julia again, she looked smaller than I remembered. The sequins on her dress no longer caught the light. They absorbed it, turning dark and flat. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. My husband reached for her elbow out of reflex, a gesture I'd seen too many times. She pulled away before he could touch her. The president leaned toward him, whispering something I couldn't hear. His expression wasn't sympathy, it was calculation. Every executive in that room knew what an HR scandal could do, and none of them wanted to go down with him. I walked past the edge of the dance floor, my heels making soft clicks against the marble. Each step echoed more than it should have. The air conditioning hummed like static. The slideshow that had been cued for his career highlights froze on the first frame. His photo from 1992, arms crossed beside a warehouse loading dock. Younger, cocky, faithful, at least on camera. He had always said his job was about control, timing, precision. Logistics is just life with math, he liked to say. I guess love had been just another formula he thought he'd mastered. I stopped near the fountain, the one that spilled champagne into tiers of glass coupes. A waiter tried to offer me a refill, but I shook my head. Behind me, the applause restarted. Hesitant, polite, corporate. Someone, probably the MC, tried to save the night. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give another round of applause for 37 years of service. The sound rang hollow. I turned slightly, enough to see my husband standing stiffly by the podium, holding the microphone like a lifeline. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened again. Then, nothing. The applause faded on its own this time. I took that as my cue to leave the stage area entirely. Let him handle the cleanup. I'd already done the heavy lifting. As I moved toward the hallway, I passed the event manager, who gave me a wide-eyed look like she'd just witnessed a car crash but couldn't look away. She mouthed, "Are you okay?" I nodded once. I didn't owe her an explanation. Not yet. Outside the ballroom, the corridor smelled faintly of lilies from the floral arrangements they'd placed near the restrooms. My reflection in the gilt mirror looked calmer than I felt. The lighting softened everything, the wrinkles at the corners of my mouth, the tension in my eyes. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. My hand shook when I placed the empty flute on the console table. The metal stem left a faint ring on the glass surface, like a punctuation mark. Somewhere behind the double doors, someone shouted my name. Probably HR. Or maybe him. Either way, I didn't turn around. The night wasn't over. It was just beginning. There's a certain kind of silence that only follows applause. It lingers, sticks to the ceiling, crawls into your ears like it doesn't want to leave. That's what followed my toast. Not outrage, not gasps, just the kind of quiet that comes when people realize they've clapped for the wrong person. I set the flute down on the edge of the catering table. My fingers left a print on the glass. I didn't wipe it away. He was still on stage, gripping that gift bag like it might explode. Julia stood frozen a few feet behind him, her body angled half away like she wanted to vanish into the curtain folds. Neither of them moved, but I did. I walked off the ballroom floor and into the corridor behind the AV booth. The hotel hallway smelled like floor polish and powdered soap. One of the caterers, maybe 22, maybe hungover, looked up as I passed. Caterer: "Ma'am, everything all right?" Me: "Everything's exactly as it should be." I didn't look back, not at the guests, not at the plaque, not at my husband, because this wasn't an accident, this wasn't fate, this was choreography, and every beat of it had been earned. I wasn't always like this. I used to be soft in the wrong places. accommodating, grateful to be part of his world, even if I was only ever the plus one. Back when we lived in a small town outside Knoxville, I used to bring him coffee in a thermos wrapped in a dish towel so it wouldn't burn his hands. I'd drive down to the FedEx drop box after dinner because he forgot to mail something. I'd edit his PowerPoint slides while folding laundry, not because he asked, but because I wanted him to succeed. He used to call me his invisible edge. Invisible. That word never hit until later. I started noticing little things first. Receipts that didn't match the cities he claimed to be in, hotel points missing from our shared account, phone calls that dropped when I answered. At first, I thought it was stress, maybe even age. We were in our 50s, trying to keep pace with younger executives who spoke in acronyms and lived in airports. But then the tone of his voice changed. That easy confidence he used to have with me, it went brittle. He'd come home smelling of cologne I didn't recognize, something sharper, younger. The secretary angle didn't even cross my mind at first. Julia was efficient, polite, the kind of woman who never stayed long at office parties. She didn't flirt, she just observed. But then came the Charleston trip. A supply chain seminar, he'd said. 3 days. I'd noticed a single dry cleaning receipt tucked inside his luggage when he came back. A navy blouse, not my size, not my style. Me. You pick up someone else's dry cleaning? Him. Oh, that must be from the hotel service mix-up. You know how those places are. I did know, which is why I checked, called the hotel, asked about the mix-up, gave them the tag number. Front desk. That blouse was returned to a Julia Montgomery. I didn't confront him then. I just took note. The next time he mentioned a business trip, I pretended not to care. That's how you start gathering evidence, by pretending not to notice. I downloaded a PDF scanner on my phone, started photographing receipts, hotel folios, random slips left in pants pockets. He was messy in ways only arrogance allows. The more I smiled, the less he suspected. I changed the auto backup on his iCloud, rerouted it to an old laptop I kept in the sewing room, password protected. He once asked me if we still had that sewing machine. I told him it broke. He never checked. The day I found the email was a Tuesday, late afternoon. Sunlight bending through the blinds, making the dust in the air look like slow snowfall. Subject line: Plaque order confirmation, Julia Montgomery. It was an email thread between her and a trophy shop in Gastonia. She'd ordered a small black granite plaque with an inscription, Suite 814, our secret. No company logo, no award title, just that. She sent it from her work address, paid with her work card, and in one of the messages she even attached a mock-up. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I printed it, all of it. I drove to that trophy shop myself. It was tucked between a nail salon and a discount carpet warehouse, the kind of place where everything smells faintly of laminate and old coffee. The bell above the door chimed when I entered. The owner was an older man with a hearing aid that whined when he turned his head. His fingers were stained with polishing compound. He looked up from a half-finished plaque. Shop owner: Can I help you? Me: I believe you already did. He blinked, confused, until I slid the printout across the counter. Shop owner: Oh, that order. Yeah, we remember that one. Pretty specific request. We thought it was a joke, honestly. Me: It wasn't. He frowned at the email, then at me. Everything all right? Me: It will be. I asked him to recreate the order exactly. Same font, same material, same dimensions. Then I asked him to bill it to her card again. He hesitated. Ma'am, I can't. Me: She made the first order. This is just a backup. You can even call to confirm if you'd like. He didn't. Small town men rarely argue with calm women holding paperwork. While he worked, I walked around the shop. The hum of engraving machines filled the air, a metallic buzz like bees in a tin hive. Rows of plaques lined the wall. Employee of the month, sales record, and 10 years of service. So many names immortalized for things that didn't matter. When he finished, I picked up the plaque. It was cold, heavy. The words caught the fluorescent light just enough to glint silver. I ran my thumb over the engraving. It felt like closure waiting to be delivered. The receipt went into the folder. I labeled it for Gala. It wasn't just about the plaque. I knew the company was hosting the gala, but I volunteered to help coordinate it, offering a wife's perspective, as I phrased it. They welcomed me with open arms. Everyone loves a VP spouse who wants to help. I offered to run the slideshow, suggested the speech order, even handled the seating chart. No one questioned it. In meetings, I listened, smiled, wrote notes in neat cursive while pretending I didn't already know how the night would end. I made sure the AV booth had access to my presentation files, which included the backup thumb drive containing her email and voice clip. I also made sure Julia was assigned to the second table from the stage, close enough to be seen, far enough to feel anonymous. The irony of it almost made me laugh. I picked the exact moment for her little interruption. I left a 10-minute gap after his speech for spontaneous tributes. I even printed an extra copy of the program with that slot highlighted in case anyone questioned it, and I practiced the toast every morning after he left for work, sometimes whispering it, sometimes aloud, sometimes just mouthing the words while brushing my teeth. I rehearsed every pause, every glance, every silence. I didn't want rage. I wanted precision, because anger burns too fast. But strategy holds. I even tested my voice in the mirror, how it would sound in a room full of applause, how it would lower just enough when I said, "Hotel suite doors." There was power in the calmness. It terrified me at first, how easily control replaced panic, how silence could feel like a weapon. And then, the week before the gala, he brought home a brochure from the event. He was excited, almost childlike. Him. They're doing it at the Claremont this year. Classy spot. They're even having a string quartet. Can you believe that? Me. Sounds perfect. He kissed my forehead, unaware that he was complimenting his own crime scene. I remember setting the table that night, the sound of silverware clinking against porcelain. He hummed while scrolling through emails. My hands were steady, but my pulse wasn't. That's when I knew. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was justice, meticulously timed, quietly executed, beautifully inevitable. The week leading up to the gala felt like standing on a frozen lake. Every step I took, every breath I drew, I could hear the ice shift beneath me, tiny fractures I couldn't see, only feel, spidering underfoot, whispering soon. He still kissed me on the cheek in the mornings, still asked if I needed anything when he went to the store, still told me, "You look nice," on his way out at the door, even if he never looked up from his phone. That's the thing about betrayal. It rarely looks like a monster. It looks like routine. It smells like aftershave and burnt coffee. It sounds like the car door closing at the same time every day. It moves quietly through hallways you cleaned, sits at the dinner table you set, and pretends nothing's wrong. I knew I couldn't just expose them. Not yet. Not without the kind of proof that can't be refuted, rewritten, or erased with a good lawyer and a company PR team. So I started building my net. The first layer was legal. North Carolina is what they call a no-fault divorce state. But infidelity can still matter when it comes to alimony, especially when the cheating spouse used shared funds or mixed company assets into the affair. I needed someone who didn't play golf with him on weekends or know our address from charity galas. So I drove 40 minutes down I-85 to a modest office complex outside Kannapolis. Brick building, blue awning. The kind of law firm that didn't waste money on marble. Her name was Donna. Mid-40s, calm, a streak of gray through her black hair that looked deliberate. Her office smelled faintly of eucalyptus and paper. Donna, you want to expose him publicly or cleanly? Me, why not both? She smiled, barely, and poured me a glass of water from a carafe etched with her initials. The ice clicked softly against the rim. Donna, then you'll need documentation, timeline, financial overlap, something visual, something social, and something legal. I handed her the folder. She didn't rush. She flipped through it the way a surgeon studies scans before cutting. Receipts, email threads, the engraved plaque confirmation, a screenshot of Julia's expense report showing a weekend charge to the Dunhill Hotel. Donna didn't smile. She just nodded once, like a metronome marking judgment. Donna, start planning the fallout before you trigger the collapse. I've seen too many women win the war and lose the home. Her words landed heavy. They stayed with me the whole drive back. The highway blurred. Gray lanes, green exit signs, radio static between gospel stations. I remember gripping the steering wheel too tight, my wedding band pressing a faint circle into my skin. I took her advice to heart, so I made a second folder. For myself. It was labeled Aftershock. Inside it, I added copies of everything. Flash drives, hard prints, a notarized letter explaining my findings, even a signed affidavit from the trophy shop owner. Every piece of it tucked away in a safety deposit box under my maiden name. The bank was in Concord, anonymous, quiet. The kind of place that still used paper ledgers. I kept the key in a mint tin inside a sewing kit he'd never touched. The irony didn't escape me, hiding my survival plan among the tools I used to mend his shirts. The second layer of the plan was digital. I created a new email address, nothing traceable, different name, different computer. I used the dusty desktop in our guest room, the one he thought didn't connect to Wi-Fi. I uploaded every slide, video, and backup file onto a private Google Drive folder, labeled, indexed, disguised among his old corporate templates. Then I scheduled an email to the AV team with a delayed send feature, timestamped for exactly 7:18 p.m. on Gala night. That way, even if something went wrong, even if I lost my nerve or someone cut the lights, the email would arrive on its own. I named the file VP Farewell, Legacy Slideshow. But the final 10 slides, they weren't about the company. They were about him and her, together, in silence. No scandalous photos, no screenshots of messages, just evidence of collusion. A pattern of expense reports that overlap perfectly with his trips, his signatures beside hers on booking forms, the plaque confirmation, magnified and clean resolution. Because I wasn't going to scream. I wanted the facts to do the yelling. The third layer was emotional. I needed to be calm when it unfolded. Not angry, not theatrical. Calm is what unsettles people most. So I rehearsed, not just the toast, but my reactions. I stood in front of the hallway mirror each morning while the coffee brewed, studying my face the way an actress studies lighting. Practiced neutral expressions, the slow blink, the half smile, the pause before sipping a drink. Practiced how to nod when the room gasped. Practiced lifting my glass at the right moment. Practiced walking out, measured, slow, dignified. I even practiced silence, the kind that fills the air after impact. Then I turned to the dress. Deep burgundy, not black, too mournful, not red, too vengeful. Burgundy was control, a quiet authority. The fabric was satin, the neckline modest. When I put it on in front of the mirror, I whispered, elegance, not vengeance, until it stuck in my throat. Heels low enough to walk away steadily, even if the world behind me collapsed like scaffolding. 3 days before the gala, he came home early. Said they'd canceled a strategy meeting. He poured himself a whiskey without asking if I wanted anything. Sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling through emails, phone light flickering over his face. I watched him from the hallway. His shoulders looked heavy, but not from guilt, from pride. Like a man approaching his victory lap, he still didn't suspect a thing. That night in bed, he turned toward me. The sheets rustled. His hand settled on my waist with the practiced weight of habit. Me. Long day? Him. Can't wait to be done with it all. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask if I was excited for the gala. Didn't mention the fact that I'd been up late every night with planning documents spread across the dining table. I think deep down, he believed I was helping out for his sake, like I always had. He underestimated the version of me that learned to weaponize silence. 2 days before the gala, Julia emailed the caterer directly. I saw it because I was CC'd as co-coordinator. Subject. Line. Special presentation for Mr. Montgomery. She asked to add a surprise tribute moment after the VP's speech. Claimed it was a small gesture she'd prepared with the executive assistant. The caterer forwarded it to me with a cheerful note. Isn't this sweet? I typed back, absolutely. Please approve and insert right after his remarks. And I told them exactly where to place it in the schedule. When I read her email again, I imagined her smug smile as she typed it, thinking she'd secured a little spotlight for herself. A public farewell for her secret lover disguised as loyalty. But she didn't realize she'd just booked her own stage time. I printed that email too, slid it into the aftershock folder. That night, I stood at the kitchen sink long after the dishes were clean. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I could see our reflection in the window, me upright still, him on the couch, eyes half closed, bourbon glass tipping slightly. The distance between us had become geography. The night before the gala, I couldn't sleep. The air conditioning clicked on and off like a metronome. He snored lightly beside me. Each breath felt like a countdown. I stared at the ceiling fan until dawn, watched the blades blur into one soft circle. When morning came, I moved on autopilot. Pressed my burgundy dress, polished my shoes until the leather caught the early light, checked the drive link one more time, triple tested the timed email. My hands shook once, briefly, while applying lipstick. I caught my reflection, stopped, took one long, steadying breath. This wasn't a breakdown. This was an exit, and exits require grace. He didn't notice anything unusual. He rarely did. He left his socks on the floor, forgot his cufflinks, asked if I could double-check the gift bag with the company's present. I told him I'd handle it. He smiled, trusting me without hesitation. We drove to the hotel together. The Claremont's facade shimmered in the late afternoon light, white stone glowing against a cloudless Carolina sky. The valet opened my door, the air thick with the scent of roses from the planters out front. He slipped the valet a tip without looking. Habitual generosity, the kind that photographs well. Inside, the ballroom buzzed with pre-event energy. Staff adjusting table linens, floral designers misting centerpieces, AV techs testing sound levels. The string quartet rehearsed in the corner, bowstrings humming softly. He shook hands like a mayor. I smiled like a first lady. Every flash of a camera felt like thunder muffled by velvet, and when the ballroom lights dimmed, when the applause started, when the Secretary in Navy glided to the stage, I knew the next few minutes would rewrite my life, and his. The ballroom had cooled by then. Not in temperature, no, the air was still thick with champagne and burnt votive wicks, but in something deeper. Energy. It had shifted. Guests who had, just moments earlier, been clapping and raising flutes now leaned back in their chairs, glancing sideways, lips twitching with things they weren't brave enough to say out loud. You could feel the discomfort settle over the room like pollen, fine, invisible, and impossible to ignore once you breathed it in. I stood near the edge of the floor, posture steady, pulse slow, glass balanced loosely in my hand. He still hadn't moved. My husband stood there, half turned, holding that gift bag like it might grow teeth. Julia hadn't sat down. She hovered at the foot of the stage, arms stiff at her sides, eyes unfocused, trying to remain unreadable. But I saw the tremor in her left hand, just a flicker, enough to tell me she realized what she'd done. She brought the match. I lit the fuse, and no one even knew I was holding the matchbook. The projector screen behind them still glowed with the slide from the thumb drive, the order confirmation, the engraving details, her name, her voice. Suite 814, our secret. The phrase pulsed against the ballroom walls like a heartbeat made of light. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, the sound of denial forming and dissolving at once. The VP of Finance shifted in his chair and looked at his wife. The HR director lowered her eyes. Someone near the catering station dropped a spoon that clattered far too loud for such a soft room. I lifted my champagne glass again and smiled as I turned slightly toward the guests. Me. Sometimes. Secrets look like gifts, but all it takes is a little light, and I gestured toward the glowing screen behind them. Me. And you see what they really are. A pause. No one clapped. Not yet. But eyes turned toward me now. Fully. No longer watching the man on stage or the woman who'd brought him the velvet bag. Now they were watching the wife, and I held their gaze. Me. To my husband, thank you for teaching me that silence is not the same thing as peace. And to Julia, I saw her blink, swallow, her mouth parted slightly like the air had turned to glass. Me. You always had a good sense of timing. I just wanted to return the favor. There was a sound then. Not loud, but deep, the kind that vibrates just behind the breastbone. It was him. Clearing his throat. He stepped forward, reached toward the microphone on the podium, then stopped, because touching it now would mean speaking, and anything he said would either be a lie or a confirmation. Instead, he turned, walked off the stage, straight past Julia, didn't look at her, didn't pause. Guests leaned out of his way like ripples in water, their silence widening to make room for shame. I watched him walk all the way to the exit, his shoulders tight, his pace too even. The ballroom door swung inward, then outward again, and then the door clicked shut behind him. She stood there, still frozen, her face slowly losing its mask. The flush reached her, neck first, then her cheeks. Her hands went to her sides, clutching the clutch bag too tightly, the sequins digging little half-moons into her skin. Julia. That wasn't... Her voice cracked like a wire pulled too thin. She glanced around, searching for someone to validate her, the AV guy, the Yensi, anyone. Julia. That wasn't supposed to... I tilted my head slightly. Me. No. It wasn't, but it did. For a heartbeat, I thought she might scream. Her jaw twitched, eyes glistening. But the room, the rows of executives, the spouses, the donors, caged her better than any guard could. The kind of audience that could ruin a reputation before dessert. Instead, she turned, walked quickly, heels clacking too fast against the marble, toward the back hallway. Gone before anyone decided whether to stop her. The MC eventually stood. His cue cards trembled. MC. We'll take a short break before dinner service resumes. A few awkward chuckles fluttered and died, but most people didn't laugh. They just turned toward one another, whispering in low tones. One woman tapped her husband's sleeve and murmured something into his ear while looking straight at me. I stayed by the table. My glass was empty. Someone offered to refill it. One of the younger assistants, wide-eyed, unsure whether he was doing the right thing. I thanked him, but I didn't drink it. I'd had what I needed. By the time dessert was served, the gala had become a different event entirely. People still smiled, but too tightly. Forks clinked plates, but slower. No one asked where my husband had gone. No one needed to. The music resumed, a polite jazz loop that sounded embarrassed to be playing. The lights felt too bright. Every conversation hung on a different subject but orbited the same scandal. The plaque had been left on stage, still inside its velvet bag. The staff avoided touching it as though it might burn through the linen. Later, the AV booth tech approached me during cleanup. His tie was crooked, his face pale from the residual glow of the screen. AV tech, do you want this? He held the bag out, careful not to peek inside. Me. No, but HR might. I smiled gently, almost kindly. He blinked, confused, then nodded and walked away, the bag dangling like a burden he couldn't wait to drop. I left before the room emptied, quietly, gracefully, like a woman whose job was done. The carpeted hallway muffled my footsteps. From behind me came the faint strains of the quartet packing up, the scrape of chair legs, the low drone of a cello string testing for silence. The hotel lobby glowed in soft amber light. A couple of guests from another event laughed near the elevator, unaware of the small war that had just ended upstairs. The valet brought my car around. The night air smelled like rain that hadn't arrived yet. I tipped him in cash, told him thank you, and drove myself home in silence. Charlotte's skyline blurred through the windshield, neon blue, gold, and glass. The radio stayed off. The hum of the tires on asphalt became its own soundtrack, steady and final. When I got there, the lights were off. His car was in the driveway, angled slightly as if he'd parked in a hurry. The porch bulb cast a weak cone of light that didn't reach the door. Inside, the house felt hollow, still carrying the ghost of cologne and old applause. The living room lamp was cold, the air heavy with that quiet that follows an argument never spoken aloud. I found him upstairs, sitting on the edge of the mattress, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The posture of a man calculating what he'd already lost. I didn't speak. Just walked past the doorway, down the hall, into the guest room, closed the door behind me. For the first time in decades, I locked it. The next morning, he said nothing over breakfast. Neither did I. He made coffee, but it tasted different, bitterer. He poured himself a cup, didn't offer me one. I buttered toast, the knife clinking softly against the plate. We moved like polite strangers in someone else's kitchen. When he left his mug half full in the sink, I noticed the lipstick mark on the rim, mine from some forgotten morning long ago. Faded. Ghosted. That afternoon, he called the office. Sick day. That night, Julia submitted her resignation. Her email was short. 3 sentences, no explanation. Just, thank you for the opportunity, and a date. HR forwarded it to him with a neutral line. Please confirm receipt. He didn't reply. Monday morning, Donna filed the divorce papers, with attached evidence of misconduct, misappropriation of corporate assets, and intent to conceal. I didn't have to lift a finger. Everything had already been built, documented, sealed, timed. By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed, the HR director herself. Her voice trembled under professionalism. HR director. Valerie, I'd like to discuss an incident at the gala. I smiled into the quiet of my living room. Me. Of course, I'll send you something that should clarify. I emailed her the Aftershock folder. Watched the progress bar crawl across the screen until it said sent. Then I turned off my phone. and for the first time in years, I slept. Not the shallow drift that comes with exhaustion, but the deep, anchored kind that feels earned, the kind that waits until you're safe to arrive. The house was quiet that week, not the kind of quiet you get used to after the kids leave and the phone stops ringing. This was different. This was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when everything fragile has already fallen and all that's left is air heavy with aftermath. He stayed in the master bedroom. I stayed in the guest room. The walls felt thinner somehow. I could hear the faint creak of the floorboards when he walked, the slow rhythm of a man pacing without purpose. Sometimes the refrigerator hum would fill the silence like background noise for a life that no longer existed. We passed each other in the hallway twice, once on Wednesday morning, once Thursday night. Both times he hesitated. Not long, just the half-second pause of someone who wants to speak but knows every word will sound wrong. He didn't speak. Neither did I. There was nothing left to translate between us. On Friday, he left for a long drive. No note, no details, just the soft slam of the front door, followed by the low mechanical hum of the garage door lifting, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times before, but never so final. I stood by the upstairs window, the glass cold beneath my fingertips. Through the narrow gap between the curtains, I watched him back out of the driveway. The taillights flared against the wet pavement, staining it red. He didn't look up. He always used to look up. Even in the early years, when he'd be late for work, he'd glance up at that window, give a small wave. It was our silent ritual. I used to wave back, coffee in hand, robe tied loosely, the smell of toast still lingering in the air. That morning, the car rolled away without hesitation. No wave, no glance, no ritual, just motion. I waited until I heard the sound of the engine fade, swallowed by distance, before I moved. The guest room closet had already been packed in quiet layers over the last month, an accumulation of decisions made in silence. My old work files in neat manila folders, the vintage recipe tin from my mother, still smelling faintly of cinnamon. 2 sweaters he never noticed were gone. The key to the Concord safety deposit box wrapped in tissue and tucked inside a small jewelry pouch. Every item had its order, every exit its rhythm. I sat on the edge of the bed, exhaled, and picked up my phone. The number was already saved. A small moving company out of Statesville. Discreet, cash only, no logos on the truck. When they arrived, the men worked quietly. No idle chatter, no questions about why half the house was already labeled with sticky notes marked keep or donate. They wrapped the furniture in muted gray blankets, their shoes muffled against the hardwood. By sunset, the rooms echoed. By the next morning, I was gone. No letter, no note taped to the counter. What do you write to a man who never thought you'd stop being background music? Words would have ruined the silence I'd earned. The legal proceedings unfolded like clockwork. Donna handled everything. She was surgical with her filings, precise, detached, efficient. Her emails came without adjectives, only results. The HR department's investigation went further than I expected. They opened a formal review, then another. Found duplicate expense reports. Cross-checked travel justifications. Unearthed corporate card transactions that lined up too neatly with Julia's weekend getaways. Her resignation, the one that came the Monday after the gala, was accepted. Effective immediately. No farewell announcement, no thank you email, just a quiet deletion from the company directory. His pension stayed locked, but his reputation didn't. It unraveled quickly. The retirement articles that were supposed to run in the Charlotte Tribune pulled before print. The photos from the gala never published. The reporter who'd interviewed him about a lifetime of leadership suddenly couldn't reach him for comment. The celebratory podcast episode? Canceled. The producer's email came 2 sentences long. Given recent developments, we'll postpone indefinitely. And that little plaque, the one that started it all, it found a new life. Donna had it reprinted, same size, same granite, same silver font. Only this time, the engraving read, Sweet 814, the end of silence. She handed it to me in her office after the settlement hearing. No speech, no congratulations, just that look between 2 women who understood the difference between revenge and closure. It sits on my bookshelf now, next to a framed photo of my mother's garden, purple hydrangeas spilling over the fence, and a copy of the first check I received for consulting work. I started working again. Small business logistics, remote clients, mostly women trying to leave something behind, bad partnerships, bad bosses, bad marriages. They didn't know my story, not all of it, but sometimes I'd hear the hesitation in their voices when they talked about being tired, and I'd recognize it instantly, that edge of the cliff exhaustion. One of them, a florist from Savannah, asked me during a Zoom meeting why I sounded so calm. I smiled. Me. Because power doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it knocks once, then waits. She stared for a moment, like she was waiting for the rest of the sentence. I didn't give it. Let it hang there, like I'd learned to do with so many things. Some nights, I still hear the clink of glass on glass, the applause just before the silence, the way his eyes darted toward me that night after reading the plaque, as if realizing too late that every piece of his downfall had been rehearsed, like I'd taken everything from him. But I hadn't. He gave it all away. I just stopped catching what he dropped. People always ask why women stay so long, but that's not the right question. The real question is, what finally makes them stop? For me, it wasn't the affair. It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the way he looked through me in every room, treating my silence as consent. It was the moment I realized I could plan a better exit than he ever planned a life with me. That was the shift. The quiet click of a lock from the inside. And once that thought took root, there was no going back. Now I sleep with the windows open. The curtains move with the breeze, soft and steady. I can hear crickets in the field behind the townhouse, and sometimes, if I listen closely, the faint whistle of a train miles away. Freedom doesn't sound like fireworks. It sounds like airflow. I cook when I'm hungry. I eat standing up sometimes, or on the porch with a glass of wine. No performance, no timing. I play music out loud again. Old jazz, Billie Holiday, Tracy Chapman. Songs that used to feel like confessionals now feel like company. And if I ever pass him on the street one day, I won't look away, but I won't stop either, because some people live their whole lives waiting to be seen, and others learn how to disappear and still leave a mark. I look at that plaque sometimes, the one Donna had made, and I don't see the past. I see the proof that silence, when used right, can echo. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.